Imagine falling from an airplane at 3,000 meters of altitude, deep into the Amazon rainforest. No parachute, no equipment. Just you, still strapped to your seat, plunging toward the ground. Now imagine surviving. December 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve. While families were preparing for the holidays, 92 people boarded LAN's Flight 508 in Peru. Among them was a 17-year-old girl named Juliane Koepcke and her mother, Maria. Neither of them imagined they were about to face the impossible. This is the true story of the only survivor of a 3-kilometer fall, and the 11 days of extreme challenge that followed. Juliane didn't want to be on that airplane. She and her mother had finished the school year in Lima and were returning to Pucallpa, where her father worked as a biologist at a research station in the jungle. There were other flights available, but this was the only one that would arrive in time for Christmas. The flight took off late. The sky was heavy and threatening. 40 minutes after takeoff, the airplane entered a violent storm. Juliane looked out the window and saw something that terrified her. The wing of the aircraft was being wrapped in a strange, bright yellow light. Then she heard her mother beside her say in a calm, almost resigned voice, "Now it's over." A lightning bolt struck the plane directly. What happened in the next few seconds was absolute chaos. Juliane later described it as if the world had exploded. Screams, tearing metal, the deafening roar of the wind, luggage and people being sucked out of the fuselage, and then silence. Juliane was falling, still strapped to her seat, along with 2 other rows of empty seats. She spun through the air like a leaf in the wind, at nearly 200 kilometers per hour, toward the Amazon rainforest far below. Experts say her survival was the result of an almost impossible combination of factors. She was strapped to her seat, which helped stabilize the fall. The dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest acted as a gradual natural cushion, and an upward air current from the storm may have slowed her descent. But none of that mattered when she finally hit the ground. Juliane woke up the next day, still strapped to her seat. She was alive, but the world around her was a green, humid nightmare. She quickly took stock of her injuries: a broken collarbone, a deep cut on her leg, her right eye completely swollen shut, and cuts all over her body. But she was alive, and she could walk. She shouted for her mother, for anyone. Only the sounds of the forest answered. What Juliane didn't yet know was that she was the only survivor. 92 people had lost their lives in the crash. The airplane had broken apart in midair, scattering wreckage across kilometers of impenetrable jungle. She had only one sandal on her foot, a torn summer dress, and no food or water. And she was still wearing her glasses, which, incredibly, were still intact on her face. Most people would have panicked. They would have stayed in one place, waiting for rescue. But Juliane was not an ordinary girl. Her parents were biologists who had spent years studying the Amazon rainforest. Juliane had grown up going in and out of the jungle. She knew things, and those things would keep her alive. The first lesson her father had taught her was simple: if you are lost in the Amazon, find water and follow it. Small streams lead to larger rivers. Larger rivers lead to civilization. Juliane found a small stream, and she began to walk. The next 11 days were a test of physical and mental endurance that few humans have ever faced. The Amazon rainforest is not a welcoming place. It is hot, humid, and filled with insects, snakes, and wild animals. Every step was a challenge. Juliane followed the stream, walking in the water whenever possible to avoid the dense vegetation. With only one sandal, each step was painful. Mosquitoes attacked her relentlessly. On the 3rd day, she found something that confirmed the tragedy: more wreckage from the airplane scattered through the forest. A row of seats, still intact, was embedded in the ground among the trees. She checked carefully. but there were no survivors. It was one of the hardest moments of her journey. She had to accept that she was completely alone. She took a deep breath and kept walking. There was no other choice. Hunger was constant. She had no way to hunt or to safely identify edible fruit. On the first day, she had found a small packet of candy among the wreckage, but it ran out quickly. After that, nothing. Only water from the stream to stay hydrated. The worst challenge came from an infection in her arm. A cut she had suffered during the fall worsened in the heat and humidity of the forest. The wound became infested with insect larvae, something common in the Amazon. It was extremely painful, and she knew the infection could become fatal. By the 7th day, Juliane began to suffer from high fevers. At times she heard voices that weren't there. Her body was at its limit. She knew she was racing against time. But she kept walking, always following the water. On the 11th day, something changed. The small stream Juliane had been following had turned into a real river. And then she saw something that almost made her cry: a boat. A canoe tied to the riverbank. A boat meant people. It meant civilization. Near the boat, there was a small lumberjack cabin. It was empty, but there were clear signs of recent activity. Juliane went inside and waited. She no longer had the strength to go on. Inside the cabin, she found a boat engine and a container of gasoline. She remembered another lesson from her father. Gasoline kills parasites and helps clean wounds. With all the courage she had left, she treated the wound on her arm with the fuel. The pain was intense, but it was necessary. Hours later, 3 lumberjacks returned to the cabin. They were completely shocked to find a young girl, injured and dressed in torn rags, inside their remote shelter in the middle of the jungle. At first, they were confused. She was so weak and dehydrated that she could barely speak. It was only when she whispered, "Airplane, crash, Christmas," that they understood. They had heard about the accident on the radio. All the passengers had been reported as lost. The lumberjacks gave Juliane food for the first time in almost 2 weeks. Then they traveled for hours downriver to the nearest place with communication. A rescue plane was sent. Doctors arrived. Her story spread quickly. Juliane Koepcke, the girl who fell from the sky and survived the impossible. The rescue teams that searched for the airplane took weeks to locate the main wreckage. Even knowing the approximate location, the jungle was so dense that navigation was nearly impossible. Sadly, Juliane's mother did not survive the accident. Receiving this news was the most difficult moment of all for Juliane. Yet Juliane's story touched the world. She was the only survivor among all the passengers. A true miracle. Juliane fully recovered from her physical injuries. She returned to Germany, completed her studies, and surprisingly followed in her parents' footsteps. She became a biologist specializing in Amazonian bats. She went back to the very forest that had nearly defeated her. In 1998, she returned to the crash site with a documentary filmmaker. The wreckage was still there, slowly being swallowed by the jungle. Juliane said she felt no fear. The forest was not her enemy. In a way, the forest had protected her. Today, at 70 years old, Juliane Koepcke continues to work in Amazon conservation. She says she does not consider herself a heroine. She simply had luck and the preparation her parents gave her. But think about this, a 17-year-old girl. A fall from 3,000 meters. 11 days alone in one of the most challenging jungles on Earth. Serious injuries, no food, no proper equipment. And she simply walked out. If that isn't extraordinary, I don't know what is. If you enjoyed this inspiring story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think you would have the mental strength to survive something like this? Until the next story.